Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello, everybody. Today we are going to start our course on morphology. Of course, we begin with Unit 1. In Unit 1, we are here going to deal with the assumed model of grammar, as well as the different definitions of morphology. Moreover, we are going to discuss the notion uh, how much morphology languages have. Let's begin with the assumed model of grammar here. So according to this model, we notice that meaning is the input while the sound is the output. Let's call it a meaning to sound model of grammar. In linguistic theory, one commonly assumed model of grammar conceptualizes a language as a system that transforms meaning into sound. In this model, actually here, as we see, meaning serves as the input, right? While the sound is the output for this process. And it involves three, actually, main or key components. So the first component is morphology here. The second component is syntax. And the third component is phonology. So each of these components, if you see here, each of these components, we can say, plays a crucial role or important role in structuring linguistic expressions, ensuring that abstract semantic representations are ultimately realized as spoken or written forms. Let's begin with let's say the model in the middle here, which is syntax. In the first stage of the process involves syntax, which organizes words into structured phrases and sentences. Syntax here operates according to this model, operates, let's say, based on rules that determine word order, grammatical relationships, and hierarchical structures. The syntactic components ensures that meaning is arranged in a way that conforms to the rules of a given language. Now, if we move to morphology, once the syntactic structure is established, morphology comes into play. This level deals with the internal structure of words, including inflections, like tense, inflectional system, like tense, case, number, etc., and derivation, of course, like affixation, compounding, etc. Morphology here in this model ensures that words are appropriately modified to align with syntactic requirements and convey precise meaning or meanings. Finally, here in this model, we see phonology, which stands here in the middle just before the output, which is sound. After morphology has shaped the words, phonology takes over to determine how these words are pronounced. I mean, the phonetic form, which is in the sound system. Phonological rules govern sound patterns, stress, intonation, phoneme interactions, and so on and so forth. At this stage, actually, abstract linguistic representations are mapped into specific phonetic forms. That's the phonetic forms, specific phonetic forms, making them suitable for speech production. Here, according to this model, actually, we find the output of this system is the spoken, or let's call it the PF, right? And here the input is LF. Here, PF, we mean phonetic form, and here logical form. which is the input, right? So here, this kind of output, which is the PF, is the spoken or the written طبعا realization of the linguistic expressions, allowing communication to take place. This meaning to sound model of grammar highlights the structured and hierarchical nature of language, demonstrating how different linguistic components interact to transform abstract thoughts into spoken words. It also aligns with generative linguistic theories that emphasize the role of syntax as a central organization force in language structure. So here, this is a kind of a brief idea or ideas about this model, because typically this model can provide us with a clearer picture of the representation of the uh, grammar in general and the morphological knowledge in specific. So it is good that we have an idea about such a kind of grammar that we have in front of us here. Now we move to the definitions of the notion morphology. Before we talk about the definitions of morphology, we can talk about different levels of adequacy, whether uh, observational, descriptive, right, or explanatory. Actually, these levels of adequacy um, typically focus upon how a theory should be adequate to provide generalizations on the, let's say, on the definitions, on accounting for the patterns governing the behavior of the language. So here, when we talk about definitions, what is morphology? Typically, we are under the umbrella of reaching the level of explanatory adequacy, where a theory at hand should have the ability, the adequacy to predict the behavior of all languages, regardless of where they are spoken, at what level they are acquired, by whom they are produced, how they behave socio-linguistically, and so on and so forth. So in this regard, we are going to talk about different definitions. So morphology here, typically it is the internal, the study of the internal structure. Morphology, is it the oldest or the youngest? Actually, it depends upon how we perceive or how we look at the notion morphology. It can be considered as the oldest type of discipline if we bear in mind, if we know that the first linguists were morphologists in the sense that they were interested in categorizing, arranging, and let's say ordering the words together depending upon the shape. So here, the earliest grammatical texts were well-structured lists of grammatical forms of Sumerian words often attested on clay tablets. So the first Sumerian tablets used to portray, display different word forms, and these word forms were, let's say, put in lists of grammatical forms depending upon their shape. Also, morphology was prominent and important in the writings of the greatest grammarians of antiquity, like the Indian Panini in the 5th century, and also in the Greek, Roman grammatical, and also Arabic grammatical tradition. We can look at morphology as the youngest where the term morphology was invented in the second half of the 19th century, since the term grammar mostly dealt with the word structure, while phonology for sound structure, syntax for sentence structure. Here, dear students, we talk about the type of convergence between morphology and syntax. The knowledge of syntax entails requires that we know morphology and vice versa because of the clear-cut interface existing between syntax and morphology at the same time. So the first definition that we have here is the internal word structure. So actually, when we say that it is a kind of the internal structure of words, this definition is good. It is necessary at this point, but not sufficient to account for the behavior of the notion morphology across linguistically. So if we look into words that are made up of sequences of sounds, uh, we see that they have internal phonological structure. For example, when we have the word knots, which consists of four sounds, and these sounds have contrastive meaning. So knots is different from shots because in shots here, the se cannot be linearly looked at as a kind of string of sounds attached to the word shot, bearing the same weight, the same importance. While in knots, the story is different. So this type of variation maybe is unable to predict actually how these sounds are linearly ordered. Another thing, when we talk about the formal variation in the shapes that correlate with semantic changes, i.e., the change in the sound system, the alternation of certain sounds, maybe can lead to a semantic changes, and they all share multiplicity of entities. I mean, the sound set. But it is not necessary that all words ending with sa have the multiplicity or plurality of meaning. So the word, for example, labs here and box, right? They end with sa, right? Right, like this, and box, right? Both end with sa here, but this actually doesn't have a plural meaning. So the words having the plural sa actually are called complex words because this indicates number in certain systems or of word forms, like in sa and nuts, it indicates a plurality, while in labs, it doesn't indicate a plurality. So here, the definition of, so the morale for this definition is that despite the fact that this definition is able to tell us about the behavior of the internal word structure, it is still unable to provide a kind of cross-linguistic definition that deals with all types of words. Another definition maybe comes into play when we talk about morphology as the study of the systematic covariation in the form and meaning of words. So, does it happen that certain words bear meaning due to their denotative reference? I mean, with the dictionary. So, this form meaning systematically is supposed to occur with groups of words having two words with partial form meaning resemblances. For example, it might happen that the word here, which contains the sound ha, and the ear, to use the ha, which means to use the ear to listen to something or to hear. This maybe can be acceptable at a certain level, but with a huge amount of doubt in terms of to what extent it can be applied to different varieties of the language. So these actually resemblances that we have here are accidental and cannot be reliable to predict the let's say the this type of co-systematic co-variation in form and meaning. Another thing here, when we talk about another definition, as I said, comes into play here in terms of the study of, I mean, definition number 3, which is the study of the combination of morphemes to yield words. So here we have a kind of analogy and the same let's say, view towards the, let's say, the internal cognitive relationship existing between the different parts of the words. So from this perspective, we can say that, let's say, the parts of words are on the same footing with the constituents of words. So they are looked at as if we have constituents of words, and this form is taken from, of course, syntax. If we remember that a constituent is a word or a group of words that function as a single unit within a sentence structure, like VP, determinate phrase, VP, verb phrase, PP, prepositional phrase, TP, right, tensive phrase, and so on and so forth. So all of them represent a kind of single unit within a sentence. From this perspective, we can say that the morphological analysis consists of the identification of parts of words or constituents of words. So the word nuts actually is no longer a kind of, it is CVCC in the sense that all these C's bear the same weight or have the same weight. But here we look at it as if it contains two constituents. So constituent number 1 is not, constituent number 2 is se, which is the plural marker. So this nuts, I mean the word nuts here, contains two constituents at the same time. So we have not plus s, which is using hyphens here. So we have rules govern the combination of words using the smallest meaningful constituents of words, I mean morphemes. So breaking, rewrite, hopeless, rewriting, hopelessness, and so on and so forth. Finally, this leads us to the definition that fulfills all the levels of adequacy, and it can conform to all principles of the universality of a grammar, and it can predict the occurrence or behavior of all languages, regardless of their system. I mean, this definition can cognitively, let's say, provide a kind of generalizations that are applicable across the board. So morphology here in this bold here, we can say that morphology is the study of the way the words are built up from smaller meaning-bearing units, which are called morphemes. So here we talk about a kind of hierarchical structure. Hierarchical structure of the words. So morphemes are defined as the minimum meaning-bearing units in a language. So this definition has the a property of being generalizable. It can predict the occurrence of and the behavior of all morphemes. in all languages, regardless of their class or type. It can predict the patterns of acquisition by children. It can predict the patterns of learning by second language or foreign language learners. It can predict the functions, the occurrence, the behavior of the language with the speakers having a kind of a brain damage or speech, let's say, speech problems, speech pathology, leading to speech pathology, and so on and so forth. So here it can focus upon the behavior of the morphemes. Now we move to another issue, which is morphology cross-linguistically. Typically, when we say that, okay, morphology cross-linguistically, it typically means morphology, how much morphology there is in the languages. I mean, to what extent can this language express its own inflectional, derivational, compounding levels using morphemes. So morphology is not prominent in all languages. So what one language expresses for plural cannot be expressed by another language in the same way. For example, in English, for the singular plural man, men, we have a kind of ablaut internal vowel change system. For Yoruba, which is a kind of a language that has no morphology, when we say the man here, which is okonrim, to pluralize it, we have to use totally different forms like aun, okrin, to indicate a plurality, because this language actually seems to lack the sufficient morphology that works internally to produce all these inflectional and derivational levels or dimensions. Based on this, dear students, we can make a kind of categorization of languages based on how the language shows and displays morphology by using a tool which is called the MLU. MLU, it stands for the mean length pair utterance, right? The pair length, the mean length pair or the ratio of morphemes per words, i.e., how many morphemes are there in the word form. So when we talk about their students, this business, I mean the MLU, we talk about the number of morphemes, right? Number of morphemes divided by the number of word forms, divided by the number of word forms. Typically, the output is out of 4. So we have different quarters. In which quarter the language falls, we can tell that this language has a huge amount of morphology, like Greenlandic Eskimo, which is called polysynthetic. So for polysynthetic, we have a language that is in the fourth quarter, which is between 3 to 4. Synthetic, no morphology, more morphology is there, like in Arabic and Italian, which falls in the third quarter. Analytic languages, where languages having morphology that plays a modest role, like in English and other Romance languages, German, and so on and so forth. And finally, we have isolating language, the language that has no morphology at all. So here we have So of course, this is A in the third quarter, B in the in the fourth of 1A, B in the third, C in the second, and D, which is isolating, in the first quarter. The division of here based on the quarters comes from whether the language is isolating, which is from 0 to zero point 0.9, or analytic, which is uh, which starts from 1 to 1.9, synthetic 2, 2.9, and 3 to 3.9 or 4. So this indicates how morphology can work. And of course, the MLU is very important in the sense that it can measure, it is a tool, one of the tools that can measure the language development that the children can show in order to, let's say, to see the, let's say, the language progress that the children have at different in different stages of the language. So this is actually this is what I mean, a very important in the tool for the measurement of language acquisition. Here, if we look at a quick look at the classical Greek, we have a kind of data here. Typically, dear students, the data we have kind of horizontal level and we have vertical level. These two levels actually express different inflectional criteria. So here we have data. We call it data. In the future, we are going to call it a problem set. This is a problem set is a kind of collected data to see the behavior of the language, the behavior of the language. So here in the data here we have, for example, I write graphu, graphice, graphi, graphumen, graffiti, graphausi. So here, if we look into this data, we find that there is a kind of common factor, common form, which is called a graph, right? Which is called a graph to mean to write. So here we can say that once we know that the graph is the non-changing pattern in the data, it means to write. And then we start, let's say, sorting out the affixes, whether they are prefixes or suffixes, and what they express at different levels of inflectional morphology. I mean, tense, case, number, mood, aspect, and so on and so forth. So here, for example, when we have a graph, right? Graph, we have the U, right? We have the U to indicate the first person singular, I, graphice, eyes, right here, to indicate the second person singular, graphi, which indicates the third person singular, he, she, whether feminine or masculine, graphumen, that indicates the first person plural, not singular. So U here is I, but umen is the first person plural, we. And the graffiti, et here, which is you, second person plural, and the graphausi, which is third person plural. So what we can come up, well, the generalization that we can come up with at this point is that in this language, which is a classical Greek, that this language loves suffixation, and it seems that the inflectional level, the inflectional processes occur in the suffixation or as a suffixation process. We do not see any evidence for prefixation processes about this language. So we can come up with the idea that here, according to the data in general, we can know the behavior of this of the language in general that at hand that we study. So as we said, in terms of classical Greek, the behavior typically is represented via suffixation, not prefixation. And if we move to other maybe languages that we are going to see in the future, we find they can be maybe they can work with prefixation and suffixation at the same time, or infixation within the middle of the word, or circumfixation on both edges of the word. That depends upon the language. This change in general, this change in the data, if you remember in the last class, this type of data here represents the so-called paradigm, and this paradigm contains inflectionally related word forms representing different inflectional tools that we have here. Okay, so we divide the words above into morphemes, of course, roots, and figure out the meaning. And also we know the roots. So here we have the root called theta here, and we have the suffix. And we said that this suffix represents a different inflectional level, Okay. How to do a morphological analysis? Typically, dear students, when we talk about morphological analysis, we look into the pieces that the word, I mean morphemes, that the word has, what's the meaning of each morpheme, and how these morphemes are combined. So we make a kind, when we are given a set of words, sentences from the language, we are asked to find the pattern, the pattern that reflects the behavior of the language. I mean the morphemes. So here, according to this data, we have, for example, in this language, which is Cree, right? Which is a Cree, we say, I mean, how we can split the word into its own roots and morphemes. So Chi-man, which means canoe, but Nichi-man, which is my canoe, Sunya, money, Ni Sunya, my money, Wiyash, meat, Ni Wiyash, my meat. So we can come up with the generalization that a kind of this kind of language actually deals with prefixation, unlike Greek, right? Unlike Greek, right? So here we say that it is ni, which represents the first person possessive form, right? So here, typically, it enables us to know how this language works. So especially when it comes to finding pairs of words after they are translated, and how these pairs of words work together, and how they co-vary, how the corresponding differences between them can tell us about the behavior of the morphological representation. And of course, we look how we rely upon a certain theory to make these changes represented properly. So here, these are very important criteria that we look into. So what kind of morphological category we are dealing with? Is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it a particle? Is it an adjective? It's an adverb. It is a compound, and so on and so forth. What change that takes place in the root to express this category? Where in the stem this change takes place, whether it is in the pre or post or within, I mean prefix, suffix, or infix. Is there any special condition? Are there any special conditions that that trigger the change at each level. These conditions that when we know, we can represent them via rules. So it is important to know these conditions, their position, what motivates them, and what the result is that we can have at this point. So it is important to know these things and to know about the let's say the morphemes that precede or follow the stems. Thank you.